Welcome to Altars of Metal Live. Good evening, metalheads, and welcome to another killer episode of Altars of Metal Live. Tonight we have something truly special for you, part 2 of our exclusive interview with a legend in the metal world. Joining us once again is the one and only James Murphy, a guitarist whose name is carved into the history of extreme metal. James has left his mark with iconic bands like Death, Testament, Obituary, Agent Steel, Konkhra, and many, many more. From mind-blowing solos to crushing riffs, his influence is undeniable. Leading tonight's interview is none other than our very own Vasilis Vic Kouroumalis, a passionate metalhead and the driving force behind these deep dive conversations. If you caught our first session with James, you know this is going to be an insightful and unforgettable chat. So grab a drink, turn up the volume, and get ready for another epic night of metal talk. So, hello gentlemen, hello James, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for joining us back. And hello, Vic. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's very easy for me just to step back and give you the lead for now. So I think it's your turn tonight.
Okay, thanks. So like I said to James before we started, I'm a big fan of James. And I've been following his career since Spiritual Healing. That was the first time I encountered your work. And I wrote the questions for the previous chat, and there were so many interesting stuff being said that I wanted to ask some more questions and also close the gaps between some of the other ones. So if you don't mind, we can go right back to the beginning where you were saying that you were a kid listening to Kiss and then getting to know guitar and everything. There's a gap between that and you joining Agent Steel. So I was wondering how you got into metal at the and which. Okay, well, start with that.
Got into metal at a very early age. As you noted, my very first, band that I was enamored with as a kid was Kiss, and that's the story of a lot of guys from my generation, Gen X, and especially the ones on the early edge of Gen X. We all loved Kiss, and I've talked to so many of my peers that are exactly the same, this love Kiss and Ace Frehley and, the whole. And, at the time that I discovered Kiss, I had really only prior to that listened to whatever records my dad had. And my dad had an interesting eclectic collection, and this is going back to the 70s, back to when I discovered Kiss, and he had everything like, Steely Dan and Doobie Brothers and, pretty much anything with Michael McDonald singing on it, Eagles, and, stuff like the Guess Who, and man, I can't even think of everything that he had. I still have a bunch of those records, but even like some disco stuff like Chic,
right.
Freak Out, And I love all that stuff because I grew up listening to it, and
so what
I got
was the
into
next step
sort of
after Kiss?
Well, the next step was discovering Kiss, and that was, I think it was probably due to a 4th or 5th grade friend who I don't really remember. I remember his name was Jimmy McGowan, and I would go to his house and hang out with Jimmy McGowan, and his parents had bought him a turntable and bought him records, and he had all like the first 4 Kiss, releases or something like that, 4 or 5 Kiss releases. And I was absolutely taken with it right off the bat. I had seen some stuff on TV, this and that, and the other, but my first opportunity to really sit and listen to the records all the way through was on Jimmy McGowan's vinyl. So I started immediately getting them myself. And, I only had this really crappy plastic turntable to listen to, but I really threw myself into that listening to music. And but my dad had a really nice Marantz stereo, a 70s Marantz. I mean, this stuff was it was wooden chassis they were beautiful, and a lot of that stuff still survives to this day because they just made it so well back then, and it's very expensive if you find it now. But my dad had a really awesome system, so I would get my records and I would wait till he was gone, and I would play my records on his system. And I just the Kiss was my gateway into heavier stuff. And I think the very next thing after Kiss was Aerosmith, then Queen, and then like AC/DC, which then led to like Black Sabbath and Rush. And I just started collecting all of these records, and I would just sit in my room and listen on my crappy turntables, graduated every once in a while to a slightly better one. But I would just sit in my room in the dark and listen with headphones on and just internalize the music, so that's how I got into the heavier and heavier stuff. And that was starting with the first time that we lived in Germany, which was 75 to 79, I think. And then we went back to the States, and I started, weirdly enough, it was in the States that I got into like UFO because of a friend of mine in Texas. It turned me on to the Strangers in the Night album. And I started getting into them and getting into all their Lights Out and Obsession and all of those, and discovering Schenker and the Scorpions all at the same time. And then we went back to Germany. And when we went back to Germany, by then I was 15, and I was really bitten by the bug to play. I had all this music internalized in my head because I would just sit. It's all I would do is just listen to music and memorize every little nuance of it. I think it really aided me in being able to quickly learn songs and what things should sound like. And, I had the ear to, all I had to do was connect my hands, my muscles to, in my hands to my ears. And then I was able to play pretty quickly. So it went like that. I went back to Germany, and I started, by then I had discovered Iron Maiden already. And I was well into Judas Priest and Sabbath and all of that by then, and Blue Oyster Cult and some other, other stuff that might be, more considered hard rock or old school hard rock. These days, Thin Lizzy and all of that. I had discovered all of that already. By the time I got back to Germany, I had already started listening to all that stuff and collecting the records. But what I also did was, I went to Frankfurt American High School in Frankfurt, Germany. And it was an open campus there. And you weren't allowed to skip your classes technically, but no one stopped you from walking off the campus. You could walk off the campus. And so me and my friends, it also had a smoking area. So you could smoke at school. You just had to go to the smoking area. And right. I didn't smoke cigarettes really, but that's where all my friends hung out, all the heavy metal kids and all of that. So we would get together there and skip class. We'd just cut and go into downtown Frankfurt. The school was pretty close to an U-Bahn station, one of the undergrounds, and we'd go hop on that and go into downtown Frankfurt. And what I discovered through those trips was that there was a lot of these really cool German metal shops, and it had these cool magazines in them called like Rock Hard and Metal Hammer. And at the time, they were newsprint. They weren't like the glossy magazine like today or in the last 20 years or 30. Back then they were newsprint. They were some color and some black and white pages, but it was almost like a newspaper. Both of them were kind of like that originally. And I would buy those, and I would see the ads, all these cool ads for these crazy European metal bands that I'd never heard of. Stuff like Trance and Picture and, Sortilege and H-Bomb and crazy stuff like that, and Loudness, which I didn't know about until I went to Germany the second time, and Accept and all of that. And so I would go to these German record stores seeking out these albums, and they were there, so I bought them. And I would buy them just because the cover looked cool, or because the ad that I saw in Rock Hard and Metal Hammer described it pretty well as that sounds like something I'd like. And already by then, by the second time I was in Germany, the second time I was picking up the German language pretty well. I still to this day speak pretty decent. Sometimes I shock.
Did you stay in Germany?
Pardon?
Until what year did you stay in Germany?
1985.
1985. Okay, so you were in the heart of it.
Yeah.
because Europe was.
Yeah, and so I actually discovered bands like Slayer and Venom and all that stuff while I was there that second time, and I was just going and buying the records because the covers looked cool and because they were mentioned in Rock Hard and Metal Hammer, and I would just snatch those up, and it just led me into heavier and heavier stuff. Yeah. I mean, of course, by the time you get Venom, you're primed for Slayer.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you get Slayer, and it's like, wow, what's this? Show No Mercy? Wow.
What about Metallica? And Kill 'Em All.
Metallica as well. Impression? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kill 'Em All I had. Yeah, and I believe that I also got. I think Ride the Lightning came out while I was there as well. I got them both within days of their release. Both of them within days of their release over there.
And was it as monumental as you describe it in the papers? Like
Pardon?
Was it as monumental as it described it in the history that, Kill 'Em All blew everyone's mind and Ride the Lightning as well? Did you also get that?
Most all of my friends that did. I had some hold-up friends who were just like, I don't like that, man. They're just like screaming. They're not really singing. But they were, though. But, no one would say that today. But back then, people were used to like Bruce Dickinson and Rob Halford and stuff like that. And they were just, these guys were just shouting. I'm like, yeah, it's killer. I remember distinctly, I took my boombox and I just wanted to see what would happen. And I walked, and I understand the little community we lived in, our apartment was an American area.
Right.
It immediately bordered a German area.
Okay.
And we had a fence right near our apartment building. On the other side of that were German apartments. And I went like to the corner, not too far away from that fence, and I cranked up my boombox with Kill 'Em All. I was just cranking it. I wanted to see what would happen. And no Americans said anything to me. None of the American kids. I got dirty looks from some of them. But some of the Germans were like, Metallica, super, cool, coming from across the fence, and they'd come over and hang out with me. And that's when my German language skills really took off, when I started hanging out with more German kids.
Very quickly, I just want to say thank you for everybody joining us. We have Deaf World Studios joining us from Deep South State of Texas, United States. We have also the Metal Warrior 1993 from San Jose, California, and also from Guatemala. So quite a few people from around the world over here. Some people are asking also some questions. Vic, I'm going to leave the questions
Hails, everybody.
to you whenever.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, go ahead. I mean,
just going to write...
I'll let them pile up.
Read something cool that I read over here. I'm trying to not get lost in the comments. Where was it? I already got lost. Sorry. It was Alejandro Erdmenger. He says, big fan and admirer from Guatemala. Also, and guys, about the questions, Vic, should we leave them in a bit, or
well, if they're playing, let's not have them pile up, because it's gonna run a lot. So
all right, so Alejandro is asking.
I know where we are. We can pick it up from where we left.
Hold on. Where was it?
Well, I see a question about DiMeola, and
about what?
DiMeola.
Yeah, Alejandro Erdmenger says big fan and admirer from Guatemala. How much influence did DiMeola have on you? And could you tell us something about the cover you did, Race with the Devil on a Spanish Highway? Thanks.
DiMeola was a huge influence, particularly on my picking and on my use of like those sort of Spanish-sounding scales, like Phrygian dominant. I'm talking, musician talk here, but double harmonic, things like that, Hungarian gypsy minor, these type of scales, so that those sort of tonalities, and is really tight picking. Obviously, I wasn't doing so much like the rhythmic type of stuff that he was doing, in the songs proper, but he was definitely a big influence on my soloing, in particular, like I said, with his killer alternate picking and his choice of scales, the exotic, we would call, type scales.
Mm-hmm.
You have a favorite album by DiMeola?
Oh, Elegant Gypsy for sure, almost for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Return to Forever Romantic Warrior with DiMeola.
Yep.
Killer.
Yeah.
Amazing album. Yeah, so probably
So
those
you listen
two.
to some jazzy fusion stuff and
Absolutely,
maybe?
a lot. Yeah.
And Frank Gambale, do you like his playing?
Love Frank Gambale, and I had the honor of getting to work with him as a on an album that he did with Stu Hamm on bass and Steve Smith from Journey and Vital Information on drums.
Right.
It was called GHS, Gambale Ham Smith, and I think I actually did. Yeah, it was called Gambale Ham Smith, and I'm not sure if there was that was the artist title name. It was GHS, and it was each of their initials, and I don't remember the name of the album actually, but I did all the recording. I was the recording engineer on that album. So I got to hang out with Frank and what record him and see how he just came up with this stuff. Like it was like nothing. I mean, so many things were first take, and so many things that we threw away. The first take was amazing. But he was just like, "Oh, I can do it better, James." Let's have another take. And we just do another take, and it would be amazing as well, even more amazing. So.
All right.
But big fusion. Alan Holdsworth, Scott Henderson, another guy who I got to work with, Scott Henderson from Tribal Tech, and I did an album called Tribal Tech Tones with again as the recording engineer, and on that album I was working with Scott Henderson, Victor Wooten on bass from Bela Fleck and the Flecktones and a million other artists, and again Steve Smith, from on drums.
Right. Constantine, I don't know, sorry how to read this. Jajas or Hahas?
Sorry.
It depends. Yes, go ahead.
Dimitris, we haven't talked about Racing with the Devil on the Spanish Highway.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, pardon me.
Oh yeah.
I mean Riot.
It was Elegant Gypsy being my favorite record, and that was probably my favorite song on it. And so it had some it had a riff that could be interpreted in a heavier fashion with more gained up guitar and a little bit of palm muting, maybe obviously my version isn't full on metal, but it's a little bit more
back in a minute,
pushed towards the harder side of things. I just thought the riffs in that song lent themselves to that really, really well. And I've just always really, really loved that song. And I had that idea that I wanted to do the sound of the car peeling out in the beginning. I wanted, so I sampled that and put it in. I thought it was great.
And are you not aware of the Riot cover of the same song?
I'm aware of it now. I don't know when they did theirs. If they did it before mine, then I'm not sure when they did. When they did it.
1990.
When did they do theirs?
1990 in Privilege of Power.
Okay, yeah, that was about 9 years before I did it. 8-9 years before I did it. So, but I'm not. Which album was that on?
Privilege of Power. It was the one with the horns and
I'm familiar with that album, but
that's
my favorite albums by Riot were. I'm sorry, we must have a delay because we're talking over each other constantly.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm hearing you fine, so sorry.
All right. I don't know why I'm having a bit of a brain fart right now.
Your favorite Riot album?
Yeah, it's the one with Restless Breed, I think it's called. It's the one with Swords and Tequila on it.
That's Fire Down Under. 1981.
Fire Down Under, that's the one. Fire Down Under, yeah. You guys see, I was having a brain fart. I know perfectly well that album. It's in my playlist to this day, and I love that album. Yeah.
Personally, I like the two albums with Tony Moore on vocals. 1988, Thundersteel and Privilege of Power. Privilege of Power is really progressive. It's not a straight speed power heavy metal album. It's got loads of experimentation. I think it would be worth your while to take a listen. It's Very nice. And the cover of Racing with the Devil in the Spanish Highway is great, excellent. Anyway,
I will check it out because I've heard that they did it, but I can't say that I've ever heard their version.
You know, Bobby Jarzabek on drums, and it's insane.
Yeah, Bobby's great. Bobby's great.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So, any other questions, Dimitris?
Yes. Just gonna read Konstantin Jajas or Hajas. I don't know. Depends on if you read it in Spanish or in English. He says, I don't know if the world is worse or better, but riding the bus from work while watching James Murphy live is pretty surreal. Used to see him only on booklets or magazines. So, good to have you on the show, man. Thank you for joining.
Same here. Same here. I get to talk
Cheers,
to you.
man. Cheers.
And Yorgos Theodoris from Greece, he's asking a question. But George, we've asked that in the first part of our interview, in the previous interview. You got to watch the first one. So I'm not going to repeat questions that we did in the first show. And Deaf World Studios, he says, not really a question, but more of a compliment. James, I thank you for busting my skills to learning sweep picking from your time in Testament, he says. And
cool, man.
Also, we have where is it? We have Savas from Acid Death joining us. He says a big hello to all. Big hello to Mr. James Murphy. So.
Savas.
I think this is also a question by its own, and it's a news that was just announced a couple of hours ago on social media, and I think you could tell us more about it. About Acid Death.
Yeah, I'm gonna be playing a solo on the new Acid Death album.
Killer. And just to inform everybody, James is gonna be performing a solo on a song, and it's gonna have also guest vocals by Kelly Shaefer from Atheist in the same song.
That's right, my buddy Kelly.
Yeah. So it's gonna be killer. Acid Death, ladies and gentlemen. Keep it in mind. The new album Evolution is being recorded, mixed, and everything. So very soon we're gonna have news from Acid Death. Thank you for joining, Savas. Right, that's everything from me for the moment. Vic, go ahead.
Lovely. So I can get back to the story of your life, James. And you're now getting into thrash metal and more extreme metal. You're in Germany, but
yeah, in Germany, yeah. And you understand that the time that I came back to the States, I came back to Florida, Central Florida, the Tampa-ish area. Actually, my family lives in a town called Lakeland. That's about 45 minutes or so from the western edge of Tampa. So a little bit. So I'm a little bit more east, and perhaps it's slightly a little bit north of Tampa. But so I here I was 17 years old, and
were you aware of Savatage and Nasty Savage and all those bands?
I was aware of them because of Metal Hammer and Rock Hard magazines, and another magazine that I started ordering in the mail back then called Metal Forces.
Right, Bernardo's magazine.
Yeah, and so you know, I had all these magazines, and so I was familiar with these bands. I don't think that I found any Savatage in Germany. I take it back. I think I might have bought Dungeons Are Calling or something in Germany.
Dungeons Are Calling. Right.
Yeah, but
both awesome.
Shortly after I got back, an album called Power of the Night came out by Savatage, and I snatched it up, and to this day, it's my favorite Savatage album. I love that album.
Well, the self-titled track is one of the best metal songs ever recorded, in my opinion.
What is it?
The self-titled track, Power of the Night, is one of the best metal songs ever recorded. And Chris Oliva is one of my top 3 guitarists. What do you think of Chris Oliva in general?
Yeah. Children of the metal.
One of the most metal voices ever. Yeah, John. I love it.
Oh, yeah. It's sick. Chris Oliva was absolutely a massive influence on me. And 2 bands from the area that I I had heard of already, and I think I had heard some stuff like Nasty Savage. I'm pretty sure I heard the Wage of Mayhem demo while in Germany. I was tape trading with some people, and I got that in a tape trade. And Savatage, I believe this is 40 years ago now, so it's hard for me to remember exactly. 40, 41, 42 years ago we're going back to. So I believe that I had Dungeons Are Calling before I came back from Germany, but certainly I got Power of the Night very shortly after arriving, and also the debut Nasty Savage album, on Metal Blade. And I started immediately going to their shows in the area because I was here. And through that, I started discovering some other bands that I had heard rumors of, and I think I probably had some of the demos of from tape trading before I got back to Florida. But I really just they started really coming to my awareness then and there, which was bands like Xecutioner, who became Obituary, Mantas, who became Death, Ravage, who became Atheist, and on and on, and Morbid Angel, all of them. And I started immediately going to every show that I could, and which was pretty much all of them. And I also started auditioning for bands about that time. And you got to understand that at that point in time, I had only been playing guitar for real, like in earnest. I had only been playing guitar for about 1.5 years. Now, it goes back a few more years that I was actually learning some chords, from my dad. He taught me some open chords and, taught me how to play some melodies and this and that. But I didn't really start trying to learn how to play guitar with the goal of playing in a band until very shortly before I left Germany, and actually did my first show with my first band there in Germany. We did some cover songs at a high school variety show. But I had only been playing for 3-4 months at the time that I did that. And so I was able to quickly get songs under my fingers and it was just a matter of building up the strength of my hands, because I knew what the songs were supposed to sound like. I just had to get my hands the ability to play them. So I learned quick. I progressed rapidly once I really started, and because I didn't start really until I was 16. So back in Florida, going to these shows, and I started auditioning. There was a big music store in the area called Thoroughbred Music. I have a lot of great stories from Thoroughbred Music. One of the cool stories from Thoroughbred Music was, I had gone to a couple Morbid Angel shows, and I had just recently gone to one in a town called Brandon that's not too far away from here. And I went to this show in Brandon and saw Morbid Angel with Massacre opening, I believe. And
before the drama.
Oh yeah, this is long before all that. As far as I know. I certainly wasn't clued into any of it, if there was any. I don't know. It was before the record deals. Let's put it that way. For sure. And I think Death had their deal by then, because Scream Bloody Gore was shortly to come out, I think. But I went to so I was in Thoroughbred Music one day and ran into Richard Brunelle. And he kind of looked at me like he recognized me, because I had talked to him at a show, in that show in Brandon, and he kind of looked at me like Simi recognized me. And I was like, "Oh, hey, dude, what's up, Richard? What's going on with you guys? What's up with Morbid Angel?" And he goes, "Oh, dude, we signed to Gorka Records, and we got our first album about to come out." And this was like maybe 1986.
Okay, so he was talking about Abominations of Desolation.
He was talking about the very first album, Abominations
of Desolation.
Abominations, yeah. And he was telling me about it. He was saying, "Yeah, it's our new album. It's about to come out. We just got it on. I got a mix here on cassette, dude. Come out to my car and I'll play it for you." And he had this convertible with a tape deck. Everyone had tape decks then, because we just did.
Of course.
CDs had just started to come into existence, and nobody had them yet. And So I went out and sat in his car with him, and he played me pretty much the whole album. He was very proud to play for me. I thought any minute he'd say, "Oh, that's enough. That's all you get to hear." But he just kept going and let me hear the whole thing. And I was just like, "Holy shit, this is so good!" Probably can't hear it, but I love riffs like that, man. Trey's an interesting character, but man, he wrote some great riffs.
Yeah,
and he's rightfully a legend, rightfully so. And
any famous bands you auditioned for at that point?
Well, I started going on auditions, and this is one of the reasons why I brought up Thoroughbred Music, is because the way there were two ways to find bands to audition for in the metal scene back then. Well, I suppose there's three. You could get it through word of mouth if you knew people that knew people. But if you didn't know anybody, the two methods were, there was a I think it was called Bay. No, that was San Francisco area. There was a Tampa kind of version of the same type of rag that they had in San Francisco area. It was a music rag. I don't remember exactly the name of it in the Tampa area.
Okay.
But it was like a newsprint rag, what we used to always call a rag. And it was music scene based, and the classified ads in there. So you could find auditions to classified ads in there, but you had to wait for it to come out. And I forget whether it was bi-weekly or monthly or whatever. I forget. It may have been weekly. I don't rightly remember, but it hasn't existed for some time, I don't think. But the other way was to go to Thoroughbred Music on Hillsborough Avenue in Tampa. And when you walk in, turn to the right, there's a hallway that went down to where the restrooms were and where the teaching studios. They had teachers there. A teacher that I met there, I didn't take lessons with him, but I met him there at the time, was Ralph Sanzola. So that's where I first met Ralph. He was teaching at Morrisound, and I mean not Morrisound, Thoroughbred. But there was also in that hallway a giant cork bulletin board.
Right.
And bands would place their ads with calls for auditions. So I went for about a year and a half after I got back. Like I said, I got back in '85. And for the next year and a half, I went on every audition that I could. I'd practice. I'd learn as many songs as I could. I would try to improve my lead playing, improve my rhythm playing, work on my songwriting. I was just doing that all because I lived at my mom's house in the absolute boondocks. I mean, the country bumpkin land. And from her house, it was an hour or a little over an hour drive to Tampa for me. But I would do it a couple of times every week. I would be there in Tampa. And just collecting they had mostly most common things that you'd see the band's logo and it'd say what they were looking for, a guitar player, and they'd have all the obligatory qualifications like you got to have a cool look and long hair and good equipment and reliable transportation and all of that, So I thought I had all of that. I had transportation. It was reasonably reliable. I had equipment. I thought it was pretty good, and I thought, I thought I was ready, but I went on so many auditions, and some of those bands still exist to this day. One of them is a band called Oblivion.
Sorry?
Not the French Canadian band Oblivion. A different
Oblivion.
Yeah.
Not Oblivion.
Oblivion, the Florida Oblivion.
Again. Okay.
Sorry, kind of power metal. Yeah, no, the EON, I think that's a French Canadian band.
Canadian. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. These guys are from Florida. They're actually still gigging. Or they've reformed in recent years. They had the most metal back in the day, other than like Nasty Savage or Savatage. These guys had the most heavy metal looking logo ever. And I wanted in the band just so bad just because I thought the logo was cool.
Yeah.
And I went and did that audition, and I got turned down. I went and did a band called, I think they were called Vengeance Incorporated, a band from Florida, and I got turned down for that. I kind of wanted in that band because that guy had his own studio built like in his garage. It was and he had done a pretty decent job of it and seemed to know what he was doing. So I kind of wanted that gig, and they seemed pretty well. I was just trying out for everything I could try out for. And in the meantime, I'm getting into heavier and heavier music. I'm getting into, I'm way into Death and Morbid Angel and Atheist, and started, getting into all of it, and a bunch of European bands. I was into all the Teutonic, thrashers, Creator Devastation, Creator Destruction, Sodom, et cetera, and a bunch of, even heavier bands from Germany and around Europe. And,
Sorry,
I still like traditional heavy metal, so I was trying out for anything and everything, from traditional heavy metal to what you'd probably think of now as like proto death metal, the early forms of death metal.
Can I just intervene a bit? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Because
give me a chance to get a little sip here.
Yeah, because you're touching upon a subject that we've been discussing here in Greece recently, about the first death metal album, the first black metal album, and the forming of those scenes in general. So first of all, what did you think of Hellhammer at the time? The band Hellhammer.
I was so totally taken by the imagery and the vibe that I didn't care about the recording quality or the musicianship. You know what I mean? It was all about the mood, the vibe, the aesthetic. That's what I was taken with them. So the actual and the overall vibe of the songs,
Right. Okay.
I was so taken by all of that, just the aesthetic and mood and vibe, that I didn't care. I mean, it was very obvious to me that it was not recorded very well. It was very obvious to me that they weren't the tightest of players in the world. Didn't care at all. And so I was very much into them, but that very quickly became Celtic Frost, and I was immediately into them as well.
Right.
So yeah.
So in your mind, what is sorry.
Oh, well, I think you asked like what I think of as the first death metal record. I mean, and obviously the big debate is Scream Bloody Gore versus Seven Churches.
Right.
I mean,
okay.
That's where the debate lies. Someone might try to throw some other album. I don't know what they're, I don't think anyone does, because I mean that's the debate. And I think that this is a mythos that they can both share. It's gone beyond cold hard fact. It's entered the land of myth, and to the way human memory works, it's so elastic and fluid. Sometimes you try to recall events from 20 years before, and there's changes to it. And if you listen to a tape of yourself talking about events, now versus something that you said to someone closer to the actual date, there's going to be differences that are going to make you say, what? I'm sure that I have it right now. Maybe I had some bias then, or maybe your memory has scratched. So who knows? I don't really, there's no doubt that if you listen to it based on the standards of what death metal is now, or what old school death metal is considered to be now, what people are calling death metal now, I like some of it, I don't like some of it, but that's the way I've always been about all music. I like some of it, I don't like some of it. But let's just stick to what people largely call old school death metal, OSDM. By those standards, clearly Scream Bloody Gore is the closest to the mark by far. Possessed, Seven Churches has more thrash elements, but it's not a thrash record. It's somewhere in between.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Death
so
thrash,
yeah. So I would say Possessed was the first death thrash band, and obviously they morphed into a more full-on death metal outfit by these days. And Death was probably the first death metal. Scream Bloody Gore was the first properly death metal. But they were close. It was like, here's thrash, here's death metal, and Possessed was like about here. But Scream Bloody Gore was here, So.
But at the time, did you call it a death metal album or a thrash metal album?
I did. I did. And I can't honestly swear to you that it wasn't simply because there was a song on the album called death metal,
Right.
Death metal, yeah. Death metal, yeah. Come on.
Awesome vocals.
Can I read a few comments?
Oh, I love Jeff. You know, Jeff's. I love Jeff's vocals. I love that album. And in fact, I love every Possessed release, including the most recent one from a few years ago.
Yeah, it was a great one.
Can I read a few comments again, very quickly?
Sure.
Right. My friend Vitamin Death, you might remember him. He's always there in the comments. He says, Martin from Celtic Frost, rest in peace, once said that what they did with Hellhammer was adding new shades to darkness, not only black. Aesthetic is the key word, is his comment.
Yeah. It was an aesthetic. That's what they that's what they were creating. Now, was it properly death metal or something? No, of course not. It wasn't. You know, it was Celtic Frost. You can't, you know.
You can categorize that.
But, I mean, what else do you call it today? You know, in hindsight, call it death metal. But, you know, I mean, a lot of people think of the earliest of the first black metal album as the album Black Metal by Venom. But wasn't it really probably more properly the debut Bathory, maybe? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Ed, Constantine, again.
Or the third one.
Sorry, Vic?
Or the
third one, Under the Sign of the Black Mark. I mean, that for me, that's the blueprint for black metal.
Yeah,
and to be honest,
Under the Sign of the
James,
Black Mark is the shit. Yeah.
I'm 10 years younger than you, so I'm allowed a difference of opinion in the sense that, for me, Scream Bloody Gore as well has a lot of thrash. You can hear the thrash in it, but for me, the first pure OSDM album is Leprosy. That was the one where it had a very death metal vibe. Scream Bloody Gore has the extreme thrash vibe to my ears.
Here's where I think that comes from. I'll tell you where I think that's come from. We grew up in an area I grew up in the era where all the first thrash metal bands had pretty wretched production. And, you know, Scream Bloody Gore has kind of ratty production,
like
you know.
It
was the aesthetic at the time. That's what people were going for. But Scream Bloody Gore has the same kind of aesthetic recording-wise as a lot of those old thrash metal albums did. The early Creator, the early Destruction, and I would say that Leprosy was the first OSDM album of the modern era production-wise, or at least perhaps what I'd call the middle era. You know, the 90s era, where, you know, you had really good producers coming out, like Scott Burns and eventually, you know, Colin Richardson and people like that, making these records and making them actually sound good, you know? And, you know, I mean, some people may quibble with that. I mean, I've heard people say that they hate the production of this, that, or the other album that I think is good. But it's because I come from the perspective of being there at the time. And at the time, it was the best sounding thing there was. There was no death metal album better sound than that, you know, at the time. You know, before that, we had this ratty production. And I think Scream Bloody Gore sort of suffers a little bit from that ratty. And, you know, frankly, they got a producer who had been doing a lot of those thrash bands with that same aesthetic.
Randy Burns.
You know, Randy Burns, yeah. And so, to the extent that you may think it has a thrash sound, I think it's not because of the riffs. It's not because of the vocals. I think it's more because of the
vocals. No,
I think it's more because of the sonic aesthetic. So I still think of Scream Bloody Gore myself as the first properly death metal record, because at the time it was produced the same way all the records were, kind of dodgy, you know. And so we were listening to all of that stuff with that same level of production, and at the time, Scream Bloody Gore sounded like a whole new vibe. It sounded like, this is death metal. Okay, this is what death metal is. I understand you came along later, and you know, Leprosy hits you harder. The production is certainly a step up.
I actually love the production in Scream Bloody Gore. I think it sounds fine.
I do too. I do too. I love, you know. I wouldn't want to try to change the production on Hellhammer. You know, Apocalyptic Raids. Why would you change that?
Well,
it is what it is.
I don't like Hellhammer. I'm sorry.
Hey, it was an aesthetic. You know, it was a thing that you either loved it at the time or you never will.
You were reading Metal Forces, so you know that there were some people who did not like it very much.
Oh, lots of people didn't like it, but I loved the vibe, the mood, the aesthetic. That's what really caught me, almost to the point that the production certainly was, a different matter. I didn't consider it. The songs, they were rough, but I just considered that part of the vibe. So I dug it.
Okay. Right. Sorry, Dmitry, you were going to say.
Should I read some comments, or do you want to go ahead, Vic?
My next question is, how do we get to Agent Steel? From auditioning for bands in Florida, how do we get to Agent Steel? But
I think I kind of didn't I tell that story pretty thoroughly on the first one? If I didn't, I will happily go into it.
You did not.
Okay. As I mentioned, I was doing all these auditions, and I kept getting turned down. I mean, lots of bands turned me down. Tons of bands that I can't remember their name, but the ones that I remember their name are like I've already named, like Oblivion and Vengeance Incorporated, I think they were called, and
Okay.
But there were a bunch of them, and I would go every month or so, go collect some little tarot, because people would make these flyers, say what they were looking for, tell you their requirements, and then along the bottom they'd have these little tear off strips with a phone number. You tear off the strip, you call. You get, and you go, you meet. If they like what you hear on the phone, then talking to you, then they bring you out and you audition. So I did that a lot, and I kept getting turned down. Now this happened over about a year and a half, so about 18 months. In that 18 months, I probably went on 18 to 20 auditions. But I kept getting turned down. But I started really learning from it. Well, first of all, time went by, and I was practicing furiously, so I was getting better naturally.
How many hours a day did you practice?
I couldn't even tell you. I would say certainly that I was at least 3 or 4.
Right. Okay.
During a good deal of that time, at least 3 or 4. There were days certainly that I would do 5 or 6. I was never the 8 to 12 hour marathon guy. I enjoyed to sit down and watch a movie and relax too much for that. But I would do the marathon days on the weekends sometimes. But if I wasn't going to a show or whatever, or going out on an audition. So, but what doing on those, so obviously I wasn't playing in a band, but I was playing with bands. Every month I would be playing with a new band, because I'd be out there auditioning for them. So that was making me get better. Just the fact that I was practicing and learning and studying new things, that was making me get better. I was developing my ear. I was developing everything. And just the fact that I wouldn't get it, I didn't get upset. I didn't, there was no drama. When I didn't get the gig and they'd tell me, I would just call me and say, okay, that's cool. Let me know. I mean, could you let me know what things you didn't like about me, so that I could work on those for the future for, my next auditions that I do, and usually the people were happy to tell me in general, I got some dumb answers, just like, oh, your hair's not long enough, or, and which is really dumb, but of course, during that year and a half, another thing that was happening was my hair was growing. So, yeah, that was a big deal back in the 80s. Oh, in the 80s, it was a big deal. You were meant to have long hair if you played in a heavy metal band.
Absolutely.
And,
I remember it was a big deal when Metallica cut their hair, man. It was 96, so...
people got pissed. Right? Yeah, people got super pissed.
Yeah.
These days, metalheads, I don't care about hair, man. And it's true on a lot of bands. You see a lot of guys with real short hair in extreme, metal bands these days. No one cares. It's not as big of a deal. But people, even the extreme heavy bands cared about hair back then. They wanted you to have it. They didn't necessarily want you to have it teased up to the ceiling, but they wanted you to have long hair. So that was the thing. But I kept learning from it. They would tell me, your gear isn't quite professional enough, and maybe you play a little bit behind the beat. Sometimes you're dragging a little bit. You're not really hitting the pocket. And so, I would start I would upgrade my gear. I'd steadily upgraded my gear, and I would work on my timing. I would work on whatever they said. I mean, okay, not to audition for them because I considered that a closed chapter once it was done. And I would just move on to the next thing. And I did that for a year and a half until one day I walked into Thoroughbred Music, walked back to the bulletin board, and I saw this thing, and it did not say the band name. I was used to the logo being real big on there or something, or if it was a new band with no name, they'd say that, And but what was there was it said Combat Records Band, and I knew Combat Records. I was like, hell, I have albums on Combat Records. Death, Nuclear Assault, come on, just those two right there. That's enough reason to be interested in this, So I was like, okay. So I read it, and it said Combat Record Bands, a Combat Records band relocating from California to Florida, and needs needs another guitar player, and it had the tear off strips and everything like that. So I tore off a strip, and then I was just like, you know what? I took the whole damn flyer off and I threw it away. I was like, I don't want too many people calling, So, but anyway, I they probably put another one up the next day. Who knows? But I called and I reached Richard Bateman, who was the Floridian bass player who had got the gig with them, and went over and met with him. And when I met with him and I jammed with him, just me and him jammed a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, man, you seem really good, and you got transpo, you look like you got it together, I'll tell the guys about you and see what they say." So he called and talked to him, and then he came back and said, "Okay, so here's the deal. The band's called Agent Steel." I was like, "I've heard of Agent Steel. I never would have guessed that, but I never would have guessed it was Agent Steel, but I'd heard of him." He said, "Look, the band's got an album recorded, and they're looking for musicians to tour. So really quick, we're going to tour. So you're going to need to have your passport." I said, "No problem. I have a valid passport. I just moved back from Germany a year and a half ago. No problem. I'm already set." So they were like, they loved that I already had a passport, and they loved it. And so he gave me a tape and told me to learn a handful of the songs. I went home, and for about I don't know how many days, I forget, whatever, it was a handful of days, and I had to learn these songs. And man, it kicked me in the ass because I had to learn the solos of the guy that I was replacing, and it was a kid named Bernie Versailles, and Bernie was an absolute monster. So his solos kicked me in the ass. It was rough. I mean, I was pushing the edge of my ability and then some, just to pull them off fairly passably. And so I went to the audition and I did that. I played the solos reasonably passably, and they were super excited. They were stoked, and they hired me right then and there.
Cool. Awesome. So this is after Mad Locust Rising, the EP, and you got on tour.
Yeah.
Okay, so after that is the
album that I toured for was Unstoppable Force. That was the album that they had in the can already. They were getting ready to release and tour for, and that's the tape that Richard Bateman gave me. By the way, Richard Bateman later went on to be a Nasty Savage, and even before that, he was in some other bands, but Richard unfortunately passed away a few years ago. So rest in peace.
Yeah. Okay, and then we go on to the story that after you left Agent Steel, you met Chuck wearing the Agent Steel shirt.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think I did tell that story pretty thoroughly last time, right?
Yep. You did. I just have one more question about that. Right. Since I'm a shirt collector, was it the Road to Atlantis shirt with the triangle and the skull in the middle? Was that the shirt?
No, it was a Mad Locust Rising T-shirt. It was a Mad Locust Rising. We had on that tour, we had Unstoppable Force shirts. We had the shirt you're talking about, and I believe, and we had Mad Locust Rising T-shirts that had the tour dates of the tour I was on. Even though we weren't really touring in support of that EP, I guess they just wanted another T-shirt design, so they decided to go with the Mad Locust. And I guess they had also never really toured for that EP or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or not much. Right. And so they made a shirt, and that's what it was. I was wearing a Mad Locust Rising.
Do you still have those shirts?
I do not. Those shirts, fell apart years ago. Because okay. I rode those shirts hard, man. They were falling apart by the time I gave up on them.
All right. Dimitri, if you have any questions from the audience,
quite a few. I'm gonna try and be very quick.
All right. Okay.
Right. Lots of stuff over here. Just gonna read very quickly. The Metal Warrior 1993. It's not one of the previous questions, but I'm gonna read it very quickly as a comment. The Metal Warrior 1993. He says Megadeth was one of the bands, back then when you were actually auditioning.
No. That was in 1989. That was later.
89. Right? Okay.
That was for the Rust in Peace album.
I auditioned for Megadeth in 1999.
After.
1999. Yeah,
after Marty Friedman left.
Yeah. That's what he's talking about. He says Megadeth was one of the bands. I just recently read about that online. I really wish you could have been well enough to join them. That would have been amazing, he says. Indeed. Yeah. But I'm gonna go to
I would have loved that, but
it
didn't happen for me.
History, And further up, Konstantin Jajas or Hahas, sorry man, I just don't know how to pronounce this. He says, when writing solo parts and melodies, do you just go for it or do you build around the track? You've built so much, you've probably done both, but what would be your main approach?
I don't think it really works to just go for it without considering what you're playing over. I mean, it all starts. I mean, that's the foundation, what you're playing over, so you have to take it into consideration. If you don't, you're just playing out of key and out of time, and it just sounds like, I don't know, like noise, which is, I guess, is one approach. But, there are players that do that really well. I think the Slayer guys almost kind of do that really well, but they are playing in time. But I consider everything. I just listen really closely to what I'm playing over. I listen to the rhythm, the timing, the changes, and build it from there. But the way I usually do a solo is I sit down to record it, and I usually don't have anything prepared in advance, but what I'll do is I'll play through the part a bunch of times, just improvising, coming up with stuff off the top of my head. And when you say improvising, that doesn't mean you're just playing randomly anything. You figure out quickly what the key the solo part is in, so kind of what notes you have to play, what options you have, and it's to start noodling in there, hearing ideas. I'm very, tonally driven. So it's like when I listen to a part that I'm about to play over, I'll start to hear things in my head. And I've gotten really good over the years that when I hear something in my head, I can usually play it almost right away.
Right.
I don't have perfect pitch, so probably the most fishing around you'll find me is finding where the note is. I can usually zero in on it really quick though, and once I have the note I'm looking for, then the melodic line that flows after, or the flashy line, or whatever it may be, that I know exactly what to do. My hand just does it. I don't think too hard about it. So I'll just do that and play through several times and start to develop ideas. Like, oh, that sounds really good over that bit, and that would lead really good into that bit. Now I got to how to make them connect smoothly. Oh, I can do this, and so I just flesh it out. I just take the improvisation, decide which bits of improvisation work best at each point in the solo, and then just flesh it out so that it works as a piece. And then when I'm done, I got the whole thing done, I listen back through, and go, okay, is there any parts that would sound cool with a harmony? And usually it's whatever, a melodic line or something like that pops out, and let me harmonize that. And I've been playing harmonies this thing for so many years. I know the theory behind it now, and so I can try any number of harmonies right off the top of my head, but I usually can hear the one I want and go to it right away without even having to think or figure it out. So it's just do another pass and capture the harmonies real quick, and then it's done. Sometimes I want to do some doubles, to get a crazy thick fat sound in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Randy Rhoads used to double or triple track his entire solos. I don't like to do that, but I do like to double certain parts that I think would benefit from having that big, thick sound. And of course I'll do harmonies.
A lot.
Pardon?
Andy Larocque did a lot of that.
Oh yeah. Andy's a buddy, man. I love Andy.
Yeah, my favorite guitarist. That's the one, Andy.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah.
And I
don't blame you. He's one of my favorites.
I have 2 more questions. Yes, Vic? I proceed?
No, just because he said that Abigail is his favorite, I knew that when in the previous time you said your favorite color is blurple, which is the color of Abigail.
Yeah.
All right.
And you played Abigail live on Roadrunner United. We should talk about that.
I did.
That's an awesome performance. And go ahead.
Thank you. I at that time that I did that, which I think was 2005, I had not been on stage. Yeah, it was 2005 we did that. And I had not been on stage for 6 years at that point. Uh-huh. Really, I had done a couple of songs here and there 4 years prior, but I hadn't played like a concert out in front of, a proper, concert in 6 years at the time that I did that. 5 or 6 years. And so I was a little bit nervous, but that nervous feeling is usually only right as you're walking on about to play. You get a little bit of that nerves, but as soon as you get going, it just flushes out. That nervous feeling flushes out, and then you're just vibing. You're playing in the moment, enjoying it and playing. And it helps to me when the audience is large. And it was a pretty good amount of people there, because a lot of people, people who haven't played live, probably or haven't played live in front of a large crowd, probably think that it's the larger the crowd, the more the nerves, but it's the opposite.
Sorry, that's me. Be right back.
Go ahead.
With the really extremely, with the really large crowds, everyone just becomes kind of faceless. It's just a concept. It's just a vibe out there. You're not seeing individual people so much, and so it's easy to just walk on and play. I mean, I can walk on and play in front of 10,000 people with way less problem than walking out and playing in front of 4 or 5 people standing there right in front of you looking at you.
Right.
That's
what
so
was the
hard
largest
to do.
crowd you've ever played to?
That was probably at Roskilde Festival with Testament.
Okay. What year is this?
I don't remember it. I don't even remember what year it was.
What album?
I don't remember what year it was.
Low years?
I would have to look that up. No, maybe. I mean, it could have been. I tend to think it was a little later, though. But maybe.
That was one part of the story in the previous conversation that was skipped. The story of Testament. I didn't get how you got the Testament gig.
Well, it stems out of it stemmed directly out of Disincarnate. There was a music journalist that I had done interviews. I had been a part of interviews with him when I think going back to Agent Steel. I think he maybe even interviewed us. But certainly with Death, Obituary, and Disincarnate, and even the fill-in stuff I did with Cancer.
Right.
This guy, this journalist had always done at least one interview that I was involved in.
Just for the record,
Mike Gitter. Mike Gitter. And so Disincarnate was out on tour, doing our first and only tour to support Dreams of the Carrion Kind. And it was rough. It was a really weird time for death metal and for extreme music in general, because grunge was just taking over everything.
Yeah.
And booking agents were dropping death metal bands, labels were dropping death metal bands. Roadrunner had dropped everybody except like Deicide and Obituary, I think.
Right.
And they were signing bands like Skin Yard and Grunt Truck and stuff like that.
Yeah. Fear Factory and all that.
Yeah, Tad and things like that, and much more grungy stuff, and so we had been told that they had already told us that they weren't sure whether they were even going to exercise the option for our second album. And for people who don't know, that's the... Pardon?
Didn't it sell well? I always had the impression that Disincarnate was a classic.
I would say by modern standards, it sold incredibly well. By standards at the time, and understand that labels make these judgments based on the first month of release. What the numbers are in the first month, because even 6 months in, they're really only getting the first numbers. Something like that, they got the first 3 months numbers. So it took off a little slow. Like, it had a little burst, but then it slowed down. And we went out on the road, and every time we'd play somewhere, we'd pick up a little bit. But that's what you got to do. You got to get out on the road and beat it up, and then it builds momentum, And we didn't have the opportunity to do that because we went out on the road, and it was just incredibly rough. It was a poorly booked tour. It was really poorly routed. So, and it was just a weird time. So, we'd have shows that were, packed, and we'd have shows where 12 people showed up, and it was rough. And so the younger guys that I had in the band at the time, they already knew that Roadrunner was dicey on whether they were even going to do a second record with us or not, or whether they were going to, dump us in favor of signing another grunge act, and so things were really dicey. And I came home, and I had to give up. We made so little money that I had to give up my apartment in Tampa. I had to move back into my mom's house in Lakeland, like 50 minutes away from where I used to live in Tampa. And I had lost my job because when I went over, I had worked at my daytime gig was at Aces Records, which was a famous, heavy metal oriented record store in the Tampa Bay area for years. And I worked there. And, at the time, back in those days, you could work a job like that and afford yourself a little apartment and, a little car. And buy your groceries, them were the days, right? You could actually just get a little job at a record store and make enough money to do all that. It was a bygone era. So, but I was doing all of that, and every time I would go on tour, I had that gig since I was in Death, and every time I would go on tour, I'd have my job waiting for me when I came back. Whether it was studio or whether it was tour, he always gave it back to me. But I went on tour. I went over to England to record
with Cancer.
I went over to England to record. Cancer was recorded in Tampa.
All right, yeah.
I went over to England to record the Disincarnate album, and when I went over to England to record, I went over to England to record the Disincarnate album, and that's when the guy that ran Aces Records decided that he kind of had enough of me taking off and for months at a time, and he finally replaced me, and so I came back with no day job anymore, hadn't made any money, didn't make any money on that tour, which was shortly after that. And so I had to give up my apartment. I was living back at home in Florida, and it was really up in the air what was going to happen with Disincarnate. I was working on new stuff with Tommy, the drummer, and had started bringing Brian into the fold, the singer, to starting to bring him back in to let's start fleshing out some songs. Jason was laying out. He was doubtful about whether he was going to be able to continue in the band. There was just things in his life, like he was needing to make a decision whether he was going to go to college or whether he was going to keep trying to do the music thing. And so it was just a very iffy time. And I'm sitting there at my mom's house, kind of depressed about everything. And I had just broke up with my girlfriend in Tampa. We had just broken up on top of everything else. So I'm sitting there just depressed, bummed out. And I get a phone call. And I answered the phone and he goes, James, Gitter. That's the way he talks. Really short and fast bursts. James,
right.
Gitter. Hey, Mike, what's up, man? And I'm thinking to myself, and I may have even said it out loud, like, I don't have anything going on right now. Usually, typically, for the old school print media, they really only wanted to talk with you when you had something new to talk about. And I didn't have anything new to talk about yet. It was up in the air. And he goes, no. Hey, I'm not in journalism anymore. I work at Atlantic Records now. And I was like, oh, wow. Hey, congratulations. Kick ass. And he goes, yeah. And I'm A&R here at Atlantic. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. A&R guy. Well, he says, yeah. And, I'm calling because one of my bands needs a guitar player. I'm like, oh, interesting. A major label band needs a guitar player? Who is it? Because at this point, I would take just about any gig. I was,
right.
It was my goal to play guitar for a living. So I was interested. But then he goes, well, how would you feel about playing guitar for Testament? I was like, are you kidding me? One of my, favorite thrash bands ever, Like, I love Testament, man. I was like, and I had heard that Alex had left, but I thought they replaced him with Glenn Alvarez from Forbidden, and he's a super shredder. So, I mean, in fact, I knew they had replaced him with, Alex with Glenn when Alex left, because that Live Apocalyptic City or whatever EP had come out with Glenn on it,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he goes, oh, no, that was only temporary. I was like, no, well, why'd they do a recording with someone who's only going to be temporary? But that was what he told me. He said, no, that was never meant to be permanent. That's just, he was just filling in. They never really wanted him as the permanent guy, but they, they need a guitar player, and I think that you should try out. And so he connected me with Eric, so later that day, I'm talking to Eric on the phone. And Eric's grilling me, there's 30 questions, and I guess he likes what he's hearing. He said, okay, so he asked me, do you have a way to do multi-track recording? I said, well, I got a 4-track tape deck. And he goes, okay, cool, me too. I've got some of the songs for our new album. We've got some of them written. And one of the ones we have written is a song called Dogface Gods. And it's ready for a solo. And so and it turned out me and him had the exact same 4-track deck, So he was able to put a stereo mix on 2 of the tracks, and that left me 2 tracks to record solo. And he sent me the tape FedEx, this cassette. I pop it into my 4-track deck, cue it up he gave me the counter number, you RTZ it back to, at the beginning, reset it on 0, go to that number. And I started working on a solo, and I recorded it. And I used both tracks because I did a couple of harmonies, and I had to FedEx that back to him because there was no sending MP3s back and forth. There was none of that. Yeah. And so I sent him the cassette back, and they loved it. So that led to the next stage, which was flying me out, having me learn a bunch of songs, then flying me out to play them with them in their rehearsal space in Oakland. And so they sent me a ticket, they bought me a ticket, and I made me a reservation, and I got to work. It's there in my mom's living room. Whenever her and my stepdad would be gone to work all day, I'd be sitting there learning Testament songs. I quit. I had to take a day job nearby at a warehouse that, get this, made what they called smart payphones. Yeah, it didn't turn out to be very smart to be in the payphone business at that point because it was about to die. But I was in receiving at this warehouse, and I had only been there a couple of weeks because I needed a day job. And I quit it and just put all my time for that week into learning these songs. And I was already, a Testament fan. I was a fan of Alex's playing. Alex was, came along too late to be an influence to me, although I would have to say that probably having to learn a huge list of songs with his solos had a an involuntary influence on me at some level, but I was already well developed as a player. I was already doing my thing before I ever heard Alex. Oddly enough, I first heard him on that tour. Huh?
2 questions about
shoot
thing. First of all, your favorite Testament album and song, and second, which was the toughest but nicest solo to play by Alex?
I honestly, I'll go in reverse order because as for your second question, I don't remember. I don't remember what the hardest one was. But I know that my favorite Testament album is The Legacy.
Okay.
I can tell you that.
Mine as well.
But I like all the albums on some level. There's not one album of theirs that I hate by any means. I would say the album that I'm least familiar with is Demonic, because the only reason they didn't get me on that record, was because they had decided to just not have solos on that record. And so they just didn't have solos on that record. There's one little lick that I think, again, they had Glenn Alvelites come in and play. I think. Like he popped in and threw down this little lick of some sort. But it's not a solo.
You have a credit on Demonic, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it's a production credit or it's a guest credit or something.
Well, I didn't have anything to do with the production, but maybe I did it as a guest. I may be misremembering. Dude, that period of time, my memory's messed up by the tumor, so maybe I did play a little lick or something on there. It's entirely possible, because I'll tell you what, I discover albums that I played on as a session musician all the time that I had no memory of doing it from that time period. I was doing a lot of session work, and people, oh, you remember this album? You played the solo, man. I love the solo you did on this album. I'm like, I didn't play on that album. And they go, yes, you did. Look right here, solo on such and such song by James Murphy. I'm like, get the fuck out, play it for me. And they'll play it for me, and I'm like, what? that does kind of sound like me. I don't even remember doing it. Yeah. So it's like a Vicious Rumors album like that. Apparently I played on a Vicious Rumors album. After the fact, I started to have a little bit of memories of being in the studio with those guys and recording it, but not for a long time. I didn't remember it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. In terms of trying to answer your question, I don't really remember what my favorite. I don't know if I can tell you a favorite song. I just like I know that The Legacy is my. I don't know. These days, maybe The Gathering is a close second, or Low. I love Low. I had the most influence on Low. I had the most playing on Low.
The Gathering and Low.
Yeah, Low for me. If the thing is, my natural instinct is to not pick albums that I played on. So if I say my favorite Testament record, I'm not looking at the ones I played on at all. I leave them out of the running because it seems a little bit arrogant to pick an album you played on.
But disregarding
out of the albums I didn't play on, The Legacy is my favorite. If you're asking specifically about the albums I played on, I would put Low ahead of The Gathering by a little bit, simply because I contributed a lot more on Low, and I'm really proud of what I contributed on that album. And I remember more of it. Yeah, I was already really sick by the time I did The Gathering, and so my memories of doing it are very murky, very incomplete.
Sorry. Sorry, let me just go ahead.
Yes, you want to go ahead, Vic, or should I ask another question?
Is it from the audience or something like that?
The Terrorizer, he says, "Hey James, my name is Jensen. I'm buddies with Richie Randall. I just wanted to say that you and Chuck are my 2 favorite guitar players of all time, and I wanted to ask what your favorite death solo is that you wrote."
Favorite death solo?
That you wrote.
I'm remembering the lick right now. Oh, man. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe Killing Spree. Maybe the trade-offs me and Chuck did on Was it Within the Mind, or was it Low Life? Which song did we do trade off back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? I can't remember. I don't know. I would say it's probably Within the Mind, Low Life, or Killing Spree would probably be my favorite. But I do enjoy playing those solos. Well. Pardon?
Yeah, I like the self-titled one as well. The solo from Spiritual Healing, the song.
Awesome.
Okay, so the question I had
finishing just the last question. Sorry, Vic.
Sorry.
Very quickly from Savas from Acid Death. He says, I would like to ask James about the analog days of that season. Spiritual Healing, Cause of Death, our legendary albums. How easy or difficult was it to record those albums in analog technology?
I got to tell you, I have all the digital toys at my disposal, and it takes me longer to record a solo now.
Longer? All right.
Now, absolutely. And here's the reason why. You can do unlimited takes without affecting the sound. Plus, it's all at home. So you're not worried about the clock ticking away, emptying your budget out. You know what I mean? So it makes you feel, it gives you like a permission to go more. Yeah, and you can save unlimited takes. So you never have to lose one that you like. Say, okay, I like that one. I'll set it aside. Let me try more. And because of that, it took me longer, Back then, you had to move quick. You had to. So you had to enter prepared. Your chops had to be on point. You had to be ready to go. And you had to make command decisions. You had to know when to be finished. The hardest thing about recording these days in home studios is, with no real budget other than the time you're spending. And, time is money, but not
as much as the studio back in the day.
Yeah. Back in the day, you were depleting your budget. It was ticking away visibly as the minutes clicked away. So you had to get it done, and it made you able. You had no choice. You had to say, "Okay, I'm done." And so you got done a lot quicker than I personally do these days, because now I'm not worried about, no one else is here, like looking over my shoulder, like, how long, dude, I need to do my thing, hurry up. No one's going like this. Chuck Billy used to walk into Chuck's big thing on low when I was tracking solos. And I love Chuck. And I say this with all, love for the guy. He's a character, and he would just walk in while I was recording the solo and just look at me and then hold his wrist up, like whether he had a watch on or not, and go like that. Oh, no pressure, man. No pressure, bro. So you had people doing that. You had just the fact that other people were waiting to have their turn to go. You had a plan of what you had to get accomplished in the day, and the budget, and everyone was relying on it. You got good at being prepared and making fast decisions and committing. That's the word I've been fishing for the last couple of minutes here. You learned to commit. And these days, you don't have the same imperative to commit. And that's why I usually will tell people that are getting into recording themselves at home, I said a good skill to develop is the ability to force yourself to commit, and
with everything,
get it done, commit to getting something done, come up with it, get it down. Don't go down the rabbit hole of a million jillion takes if you can avoid it, because at some point down the line, you're going to upset somebody, because maybe they're not there at your house and there's no studio budget ticking away, but other people are waiting to get the track with yours on it so that they can do the next step or whatever. And
okay,
it's just it was easier for me back then than it is today, because of just, you had to commit, and I was good at that because I had no choice but to be good at it. It's the way it was.
Right.
I didn't know I had it in me to do it until I did it. Like I didn't know that I could walk into a studio and just start recording solos, hearing the songs for the first time, just a couple minutes before I started recording, and get a whole album done in like, 2 afternoons. I didn't know I could do that until I did it.
Was that because of death?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, okay. So my question is kind of similar to Savas's. I wanted to go back to Disincarnate, and you recorded the demo with Scott Burns, and then, as you mentioned, you went to England to record with Colin Richardson.
Yeah.
So knowing that you worked very well with Scott Burns, how come you went to Colin Richardson?
I just have to preface this, and I probably touched on it last time, but it was a very gut-wrenching thing for me to not do the album with Scott and to go to England and record it with Colin Richardson. At the same time, it was exciting because I was, I had recorded, several things with Scott. I had been recording with Scott for a few years. Everything that I had ever recorded professionally had been done with Scott at Morrisound. So the opportunity to go to England and record with somebody else, this other guy who had also done albums that I loved, like Heartwork. Necroticism. I meant to say, Descanting the Insalubrious Carcass album.
Yeah. 91.
Or Decanting, whatever, how you pronounce that word. That was exciting, but at the same time, it was very gut wrenching because me and Scott were, good friends, and we get along great to this day. I love Scott, and some of my best memories in the studio were with Scott. We just had a good time.
Right. So how would
Colin was great as well. He was a little bit more of a stiff shirt than Scott, but so I had great memories with Scott. So trust me, being given no choice was the only way it was going to happen, because if I had been given a choice by Roadrunner, I would have defaulted to Scott just because of the comfort level with him and because of not wanting to upset the apple cart. We had a good thing going. We had done the demo with them. I didn't want to upset anybody, but it was handed to me as a mandate by Roadrunner. They said, no, we're not going to do this album with Scott. It's going to be with Colin in the UK. We're just making the call on that. That's something that's just out of your hands, that we got to do it this way. And I was stuck with it. What was I going to do?
Okay, sure.
Grandstand, I didn't want to lose my deal,
Okay, sorry, who was the one who was calling these shots at Roadrunner? Who was your contact?
That'd be my buddy Monte Conner. Is also someone I'm still, friends with all these years later. But trust me, when the time comes, when the decision needs to be made or a shot needs to be called, Monty doesn't hesitate. He sticks to his guns. He's a pro like that. He's confident in what he wants, and he makes it. Okay. He made a command decision, and I had no choice but to go along with it. And like I said, there was the part of me that was excited to do it.
Right, I get that. Okay, so Monte Conner was calling the shots by that time, because I recall him telling the story with Sepultura and the album cover that Max wanted, the Cause of Death album cover that he wanted for Beneath the Remains, and someone at Roadrunner made the choice to tell them not to use that one and use the orange skull that they used eventually. And it wasn't Monte Conner who did that. It was Doug Keogh, the VP guy.
Yeah. Well, you got to understand that, the structure of a record label, it's not like there's only, Doug Keogh was certainly at that point in time over Monte Conner, and at least particularly on those types of decisions. But Monty had his things that he was in control of. He was our A&R guy. He's the guy who signed us, and and who knows, the decision may have come from Doug may have been part of that decision as well. I don't know. I didn't have that discussion. I just know that Monty told me we were definitely going to be doing it in England, and it wasn't really up for discussion. And it wasn't an argument. it was just like I got told, and I had those were my marching orders, and so that's what I did.
Okay, fine. Now I wanted to touch a little bit more on the Within the Mind project. You said a few tantalizing things in the previous chat, and I just want to hear more. First of all, for those who don't know, Within the Mind is a project that you started in 2002, 2001, 2002, somewhere around that time. After
probably conceptually, perhaps. I don't think the actual recordings started for a couple of years after that, but
okay.
But yeah, there's not a lot to tell about it, and other than it got shelved, and
it might,
the blame for that got squarely put on my shoulders, and hey, I'll take it. But I will say that there was a reason why I did it, and I will also say that that reason is no longer an issue now.
You touched upon that in the previous chat. You didn't mention a name, but I got the idea.
No, and I would prefer if you don't as well.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know the name. I just assumed the name. So I'm guessing.
I'd rather you not guess. We'll just leave it at that. There was definitely a person who made themselves a thorn in my side on that, and while at the same time not telling other parties involved that he was doing that.
Right.
Kind of, it was kind of, and I was put in a position where that was just untenable for me. I did not want to be put in that position. I felt like things were going south, and because of the dynamics of what our relationship had been in the past, I just decided to cut the cord, and put it on the shelf. In the meantime, events have transpired so that that block is not really necessarily in the way, but I'm at a certain point in my life where I'm rebuilding and restructuring here, and once it's all done, then I'll be able to revisit that if the parties involved are interested in me doing so. I don't know if they are.
Okay,
but I do still have all the recordings.
Yeah, let me just say that I'm very, very curious to hear some of those. I mean, Brett Hoffman in particular, I love his voice, so I would love to hear that, or Richard Christie, or Matt Thompson from,
everyone did a great job. Everyone did a really great job. Another thing is just going to be getting permissions and stuff again, because we got permissions for everybody back in the day, but now everybody's under different circumstances. Sometimes different management. They may have a different opinion on what they did back then than they did at the time. Who knows? I may have to replace some performances. It's probably not just simply a matter of mixing it at this point. It's probably going to be a matter of replacing some performances.
Right.
For people who just, for whatever reason, will not want to be involved anymore. Okay. I don't know who will do that, but I have to allow for the option. But anyway, it's not something that's actively on my table right now, so I can't. It's not really a point of spending a lot of time talking about it, because it's not. It's not in the works as of this moment. It's still sitting on my shelf.
Okay. Right. So my follow-up questions were all that, but one last one, but it takes us back again, way back.
Sure.
You mentioned Hallows Eve. Now, I love Hallows Eve, especially the first two albums. So what happened with Hallows Eve? I mean, I know why you left, but how come, after Monument, which was so-so, how did you get in touch with Hallows Eve?
Well, I had decided to move up to Atlanta because I really wanted to attend the Atlanta Institute of Music, which at the time was like a sister school of GIT in LA, which was, at the time, it was called GIT, the Guitar Institute of Technology. These days it's called Musicians Institute, and they teach a lot of things there, not just guitar. So they changed the name to Musicians Institute. But Atlanta Institute of Music was a school at the time in Atlanta, and I wanted to attend it. So I decided to move to Atlanta, and I was reaching out, through some people that I knew, and I forget who it was. Someone told me, "Oh, I'm friends with Dave Stewart from Hallows Eve up there, and he might be looking for a roommate." So someone, and I don't remember who it was, someone connected me and Dave. So I got with Dave, and he said, "Yeah, okay, come on up and let's meet." And so I came up, and we hit it off. We got along, and we decided, I threw my money in with him, and his mother owned several rental properties. And so we got a really cheap house to rent, and me and him together kind of fixed it up. And him mostly, me doing whatever he told me to do, showed me how to do. And then we moved into it, and I started going over to Atlanta Institute of Music and started looking into enrolling and all that stuff. There was it wasn't really like a way to do it like online or anything back then, so you had to do it either through the mail or through over the telephone or in person at the place. So I went to the extreme of moving to Atlanta to just be able to be in the position to go there and talk with them and figure out how I was going to get, where I was going to get some financial assistance, a student loan or whatever, and be able to go there. And I never really could figure it out. But in the meantime, I was working a landscaping job, and Dave Stewart and Tommy, the bass player, started talking about getting Hallows Eve back together, and so they asked me to be a part of it, and so we just started auditioning. I think we found a drummer first, and then we were looking for somebody else. So me and Dave Stewart were the guitar players, and we had Tommy Stewart. No relation. They're not even spelled. No, Stacy was gone. Stacy was gone. Yeah, no Stacy.
Okay.
So at that point, Tommy was going to be singing, which I think he might have done on Monument. I'm not really sure. But yeah. So Metal Blade wanted. Metal Blade was logically somewhat skeptical, but they were into the idea. But they wanted to hear a demo of new songs before they would make up their mind whether they wanted to continue with the band, put out another album. So what we were doing was writing, auditioning for the final spot we had to fill, and doing that. And that's what I was doing when Chuck called me.
Okay.
I think I told that story pretty thoroughly last time.
Right. Yeah, you did. Is there any material from those sessions with Hallows Eve? Any IPs of songs or anything?
I don't even have like a rehearsal recording or anything. I have nothing from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So one final one. Sorry, Dimitris, am I interrupting?
I have some photos. We did some band photos, and I have those.
Love to see those.
Yeah, I'll shoot you some over as soon as I can find them all.
Perfect.
I'll take scans. I'll scan them with my phone and send them over.
Perfect. Okay. Vic, no, you go ahead.
Dimitri.
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Because you mentioned the Music Institute and your desire to up your game, I guess, guitar-wise. So when was the point that you actually got into, technical guitar playing? Or was it just a natural thing and you just wanted to study it?
I don't know. I don't really think of myself. I mean, people say this, like you had the caller a little while ago that mentioned my sweeping. That there's some spots here and there where I'm sweeping up the floor. But if you look at my playing as a whole over the years,
it's not really
I don't do it that often. I don't do it that much. I'm not one of these guys that just sits here and sweeps all the time.
Yeah.
I use it. It's a spice that I throw in. It's a little thing. I do it when I feel it enhances the parts. So consequently, I don't do it nearly as much as a lot of guys do.
Yeah.
I don't really think of myself as a technical guitar player. Sure, I can
you're
play
technical.
fast scale sequences.
Bro, you're technical. Lol, says the Metal Warrior 1983.
You're technical, yeah.
But whatever. I mean, certainly I've worked on chops over the years for sure. So I can pull out some chops and when I need them. But I think of myself as a melodic guitar player. That's what I do. And the chops are there like when you need to be able to step on the gas a little bit. It's good to have that power. It's just like, the speed limit may be 70 on the freeway, but if you need to pass an 18-wheeler, it's nice to have that power under the hood, so that you can get around them, and accomplish your trip, safely and on time. And that's what I like. I like having, to the extent that I have any technical chops, I have them for that reason, so that I can do what, I can accomplish the job, get what I'm trying to do melodically and emotively, make it happen. Sometimes that calls for ripping some, a fast sequence or something, but it's gotta be in service of the overall vibe. To just shred technically for the sake of being technical is like it's just about the worst thing you can do. It's awful to me.
James's picking is the cleanest I've heard in that entire 80s and 90s era. Lol, says Jake Janist Guitar, the user. So yeah. There you go.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I did put in the work to do that. This is what I was saying this to my wife earlier, who's a big fan of my playing. She, and so every once in a while something comes on the random that I played on, and she'll just say something about my playing. And it happened earlier, and so I had to stop her and explain it like this. I'm like, if I relate it again to driving, let's just say one of those races over there in Europe where they're going up a mountain, a windy road.
Right.
And, if you go too far to the right, you're going to go off the cliff.
Yeah.
And sure, it's great to see the driver that's so competent and so in control of his car that he can tear at top speed around these curves on this winding mountain road and stay almost in the freaking middle of the road and never in danger of going off the side. And that's impressive. But isn't it more exciting? The guy who just hauls ass and his technique is not as good as the other guy. So he gets a little too close to the edge and he's kicking rocks off and his tire is halfway over the edge, but he makes it. He makes it anyway. And that's fucking exciting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, that guitar players are like that, and there's the guys that have so much fucking chops that they just play the most insane, shreddy fucking thing you've ever heard. And they look almost bored doing it. Just it's no effort, no challenge to them. They're not
like Trey Azagloth. To me, like Trey Azagloth says, the Metal Warrior 1993.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Trey from Morbid Angel. Trey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't classify Trey as that kind of player. To me, Trey is more the kind of guy that goes right to the edge. He goes right to the edge and almost goes off. His playing is exciting because he pushes the edge. I'm talking about guys like, I don't know. I hesitate to say a name because I don't want to insult anybody because they'll think that I don't like them or don't like their playing, but I do. I love these guys, but guys that are actually so technically precise, that it's no effort at all to them. They're playing just shredding solos exactly on the beat, exactly super clean, picking so clean that it's almost like DiMeola in his prime time. He was super awesome and exciting.
Like Buckethead.
I don't know. I feel like I'm failing in my analogy. I would say more like guys like in their prime. Like a guy like Tony McAlpine, or a guy like a guy these days more like Guthrie Govan, or or Tom Quayle, or these guys that are just technically really precise. The guys you're talking about are more like what I'm talking about. Guys that push it to the edge, to the point that they almost fall off the rails, but they don't. And that's exciting and cool. And that's what's so great, if you ask me, about Buckethead's playing and about Trey's playing. The guys
I like
that is
Buckethead
just
a lot, but
it's exciting.
I'll put him in the same category like Matthias Englund, Ia. You must be aware of him. Freak Kitchen.
Yep. Of course.
And Bumblefoot.
Yeah, he's
Those
something like that.
But, I love.
I say Ia's playing is so controlled, but it's interesting. It's always interesting. It's always cool. I love Ia, but I don't want to belabor this point. I kind of got thrown off the track of my analogy here, but I would just say that for me, the driver that stays always right in the middle and it's like it's nothing to him, and he's hauling ass, but it's so technically perfect, his driving skills. He almost never, that's exciting on a level. There's a level in which that's exciting and fun to watch. But doesn't it really just make the hair on your back of your neck stand up? The guy that gets so close to the edge that he's almost about to wreck, but he doesn't. He still makes it. He still wins. Because
I get it. We just don't agree on the names.
Just pushing the edge of the ability of himself and the vehicle. And I kind of relate myself like to that. The point that I'm trying to get to is not that I'm so great. The point is that I'm not so much a natural that I just don't even break a sweat. I have to work for it. To this day, I have to work for every little bit of chops or speed or clarity or whatever that I get. The chops are the melodicism. This is really natural and easy for me. It's my first instinct. It's the easy thing that I do is to play melodically. So getting the chops in, being able to step on that gas and get around that curve, get around the obstacle, or make the solo more exciting in that way, I got to work for that. I work my ass off for that. And I'm pushing the edge of my ability every time I do it. It's not easy for me. I'm not one of those guys that's just a natural at the fast pick thing. I've become known for it. And to the extent that I have become known for it, it's because I work really, really hard. I wore until I say this is so stupid. I'm still working on my pick grip. 40 years into playing guitar, I'm still refining my pick grip and everything, because I did it for years. All my time, from the time I started all the way through beyond my Testament years, I used to wear this fingernail down to paper thinness from hitting the strings constantly. No one ever noticed. No one ever said to me, "Oh, it sounds like you're hitting your finger on the strings," but I was, So it's just something that I'm still working on. 40 years later, I'm still trying to stay on top of that and have whatever, the chops that I have. It's a lot of work.
I have one negative thing that I always feel the guilt, because we've taken over your time and you told us an hour and a half and we're already in 1 hour and 48 minutes, and I have the guilt.
It's all right.
It's
all right. We can go a little bit longer if you want.
Yeah, we can still.
Yeah.
I don't know, Vic. You still have
I'm not
questions?
I'm not catching vibes from the other room right now.
What was that, Vic?
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I mean, whatever time James has, I'm here.
Okay, because this is an amazing.
Yeah, if you guys still have questions,
Yeah, well, I mean,
let's try to get them.
We have a lot of people in there, and this is an amazing show. So, yeah, Vic, you've got the lead. Go ahead. Okay.
Well, if there are questions from the audience, I mean, obviously they get priority.
Okay. Nothing I've picked up. Sorry,
well, I
guys.
see one.
Go ahead.
Well, I see one that says about rhythm playing. Someone is asking about your rhythm playing. Is it harder for you to do, I guess, complex rhythms or anything other than soloing?
No. Now you got to understand, I'm not. I'm sure there are a lot of bedroom guitar players in the world, YouTube guitar players, bedroom guitar players. I'm sure there's a lot of these guys that just sit around and play solos. That's all they ever do, and they're really good at that. But then they try to play a song and it falls apart. But what everyone should already know about me is that from since I was a teenager, I've been touring and playing with bands. and going on the road and hitting it hard and writing songs. And so when it comes to songs, 90 to 95% of every song, I would say 95 or higher, 95 to 98% of every song is you're playing rhythm. So you can't not be good at it. You wouldn't. No, yeah, you have to be good at playing rhythm guitar. So it's 95% of what you're going to be doing. I mean, if all you ever, I mean, if you're just a bedroom guitar player and you don't go out and audition, for bands and get in bands and go play with bands and jam with bands and record with bands, if you don't do any of those things and all you do is play solos, then probably your rhythm playing sucks. Probably the case. But if you play in bands for as long as I have, just by default, you have to be a pretty decent rhythm guitar player.
I'm guessing he's referring mostly to the groove side of things, which is another ability altogether, another skill in guitar playing, getting the groove. And
I guess it depends on what you mean by groove. I mean, sure, every music, no matter what the music is, you have to find the groove and get in it. You have to find the pocket for that music, whether you're talking about Job for a Cowboy or whether you're talking about Sly and the Family Stone,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, You have to find the groove.
Well, some people don't have it. I wouldn't name anyone, but there are some players that I feel that they're just a smudge better than a MIDI file. When I hear they're playing, it's lifeless, no groove. I'm sure you know.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Are you talking about like the sort of rash of YouTube players that they're playing literally sounds like a MIDI file?
Yeah. Well,
my suspicion is that a lot of those guys, I mean, there's so many of those guys, and some of them are really, 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 really good players. They really are. But I think they're kind of became like that because they grew up in the age of Guitar Pro. And they probably, that was their practice tool and their learning tool when they were coming up was Guitar Pro. And Guitar Pro is so robotic and regimented that if you play along to that, if that's all you've ever played along with your entire life, your whole career of playing guitar, then I can see how some guys turn out where their playing sort of sounds very mechanical like that. And I discovered something probably about 10 or 12 years ago now, that there's bands out there that grew up with Guitar Pro, which is a MIDI composition and playback system for guitar. It just you can literally just type in the tab and it'll play it back with a MIDI file, and it does it exactly on the grid, exactly boom boom, just robotic. But it came to my attention that there are bands out there that will just sit down with Guitar Pro because that's what they learned. That's how they learned, to learn to play. That's how they grew up learning Guitar Pro at the same time that they learned guitar. So some of these guys will sit there and use all the tools that are available in Guitar Pro to literally compose their music using the tablature of Guitar Pro and just listening to the playback and deciding things they sound cool and moving around and chopping it up and moving things around like Legos in there, little blocks of until they have something super freaking crazy. And they got their whole song written before they ever learned how to play it on guitar. They have to go back afterward and learn how to play it on guitar. And I'm not going to name any names, but there are bands out there like that to do that. I'm sure there are probably some of them that wouldn't mind. They probably have already spilt those beans themselves, and there's probably some that keep it secret because they think it probably wouldn't be received well. But they exist, and it's a modern, it's part of the modern thing. I'm not complaining about it. I'm not, I'm not the old man, shaking my cane at progress, if that's progress. I suppose it's progress of a sort. You have this tool available to you, but if you let it overtake your entire guitar playing personality and vibe, it's going to sound like a MIDI file. I think kind of lifeless, and it can be impressive while still being lifeless. So I get where you're coming from with it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't. We didn't have any Guitar Pro. To jam when I was coming up, you had to go stand in a room with the drummer and look at each other and play.
Were you actually using click tracks in Morrisound most of the time? Did you have click tracks?
I think that Billy may have played to a click track on Spiritual Healing, but I never heard it. It would have just been in his cans. But a lot of people have misperception about click tracks. A lot of people think that click tracks make bands sound like robotic. It sucks all the life out of it. No, they don't. No, they don't. It's post-editing, slamming all the drums to the grid. That's what makes drums sound robotic. Playing to a click track does not make you sound robotic. It can help you sound a lot more solid. It can make it sound like you can keep track of it. You know, it helps you keep track of the tempo. But playing to a kick track doesn't move your performance. Here's what I like to say to clients when I'm producing and I'm working with a drummer who has an aversion to playing to a click track, but the band wants them to, and it's sort of because he's got tempo issues, you know, so everyone wants him to play to the click track. So, and I got to talk them into it, make them understand how to do it, and I have to make them understand, no, click track does not take the life out of your playing. You provide the life to your playing. Imagine the click track just like a really solid, whatever you sound, whether if you've got a cowbell sound or if you got a woodblock sound, let's just say for the sake of argument, it's a woodblock sound. Playing to a click track is just like playing along with a percussionist that plays woodblock, and he's just really boring.
Yeah.
He's just boring. He just plays on the beat. That's it. That's all he does. And you're just playing with him. That's all. How does that make you sound bad? You know, he's just keeping the tempo for you. That's it.
Right.
It's super solid. You can play around it. You can still push and pull and move around. And in fact, it's just human. You're going to. You can't not do it. No drummer can sound like they've been slammed to the grid in post-editing, unless, in fact, they've been slammed to the grid in post-editing. So no, playing to a click track does nothing to suck the life out of your playing. All it does is keep you honest on tempo. All your feel is still there and under your control. And as long as you're not edited to death after the fact, it's going to remain there when the click track is muted and the song is mixed.
Okay. So this brings me to modern productions, and you're a part of that world. Me as a listener, and now I'm 48 years old, so my favorite eras are the 80s and the 90s.
Sure.
I miss the old productions. They sound very similar to me now. Modern metal productions. I mean, like they all have.
There's
the same
no
kind
doubt
of drums.
Yeah. I probably would have argued against you on this even as recently as 5 or 6, 7 years ago. I would have argued with you, but I can't argue. It's pointless to argue about it anymore. It's just a fact. It's just a fact that everything sounds so samey. And it already was. Even at the time that I would have argued about it, I would have been kind of wrong, about that. Pretty wrong about that.
I mean, if you compare even the sound of the same band, a couple of years apart, and it's totally different. And now you get, I'm going to use Testament as an example. They have, I love the sound they have. Not one of the bad examples of modern production. I like the modern production of Testament, but the albums sound the same.
Yeah.
You could take one track from one album, put it to the other, and you wouldn't know the difference. That's not something that would happen in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, no, you're 100%. You're 100% right about that, and to the extent that
what do we do?
To that bothers people, if that bothers any individual person, then then it's a problem for them. But it's a matter of personal taste, I suppose. I would say that I like different producers, different mixers. Work better than others. I'm not going to name names. I have my favorites. I have my friends. Most of my favorites are among my friends, so maybe I'm biased, huh?
Name some favorites.
Pardon?
That's not a bad thing. Name some favorites. That's not a bad thing.
Well, I'll tell you some of the ones that I think are great, that are doing good today, and I apologize for any I miss out. If I don't mention their name, it doesn't mean that I don't like them. It just means I didn't think of it on the spot. But I love Andy Sneap. I think he's freaking great. Vic disappeared on me.
He's here.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I love Andy Sneap. I still love, I highly respect Colin Richardson's work. Zeus, I think, is fantastic. Like I said, I'm probably going to miss quite a few that I'm a fan of. I like Tua Madsen. you know, a lot of these guys that people say, you know, are part of this modern sound. These are those guys you're talking about. There's younger guys. There's guys that I whose like work I really think is killer, like Zach Oren. I think he's killer.
Arthur Risk. Are you aware of him? Arthur Risk.
I don't think so.
Power Trip.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm not familiar with him. Okay. And I can't honestly claim to have listened to those albums enough to really remember what the production was like. And I would say that, you know, a lot of, you know, I got a lot of work that I'm super proud of, still proud of it to this day. But does it fall into the trap of, you know, some of the modern metal sameness traps? You know, absolutely. Because anyone working commercially, if you want to stay working, you got to do what the clients want. And the client isn't just the band, it's also the label, you know? Right. And
so do you get talking about the bigger these days that ask you, we want something like this, and they give you, you know, something original?
I've been in discussions with some bands like that. But you got to understand that right at the beginning of COVID, I started slowing down on production and mixing work drastically. Okay. And I started tilting towards doing more session guitar work, and also just being able to relax more, because I mean, the largest bill that any adult has in their life is their home mortgage. Yeah. And I paid off my home mortgage a few years ago, so I don't have that bill anymore. So I didn't have to work as much, and I was approaching burnout so quickly. I was already really burned out by the last couple of albums probably the last several albums that I worked on. I was already well burned out, and it was just the grind of turning out stuff, and it had to be, you know, people wanted things so similar all the time. That didn't mean you had to do it, but you had to hit them with something that they would accept. So it had to be in the ballpark.
How do you explain people not want to sound different and original? I mean, artists are supposed to want to stand out.
Well, they do. I would say that there's a case to be made, and it's certainly the argument that I think that these artists, the type of artists you're talking about, you know, who want to sound original, would they assume that that's in their music and their guitar tone that they dialed in, and just in their personality that they imbue in the music. The things that can't be taken away or replaced. But trust me, people come to you and they will tell you, clients will tell you how they want to sound totally original. They don't want to sound like, and then you start giving them something with a bit more of their own natural drum sound, a bit more of their, you know, their personal guitar tone that they dialed in for you, et cetera, et cetera. And they find ways to let you know that they want it to sound, without outright saying it. They push you towards making it sound like more like so many other modern records. They just do.
Right.
They just do. And they'll tell you that they want to sound super original, but at the end, when you try to give them exactly what they gave you in terms of like their own drum tone, their own bass tone, their own guitar tone, and, you know, without reamping, I always, you know, it's the modern thing. You always record a DI so that you can reamp if you need to. And so many times they want you to reamp with this or that or the other amp that they don't even own, because Machine Head had that amp on their one album that they loved, or so and so over here had, you know, this sound or whatever, you know. And the next thing you know, you're reamping. I like that tone you got for, you know, so and so, and like, okay, well, I got that amp here. If you want that, you know, you can try to talk people out of it, but at the end of the day, people want what they want. And sometimes what they really want is not what they tell you they want.
Yeah. Okay.
Initially, you know, eventually they'll push you where it could be subtle, it could be overt, but people push you towards what they want.
I'm trying to read the last two questions. Is that all right, James?
Absolutely.
Okay. One is, written way before from my friend Vitamin Death, and he says, do you like Peter Tedgren from Hypocrisy/Pain as a musician/producer? Abyss Studios helped extreme metal in some bleak times.
Well, that was a statement. Was there? What was the questions? The last bit was a statement. So refresh my memory on what the questions were.
He says, do you like Peter Tedgren from Hypocrisy and Pain as a musician and producer?
All of the above.
Yeah.
As a musician, as a producer, and as a human being, he's a good dude. He's good people. He's great at his job. He's a great songwriter. He's killer. He's a killer dude.
Cool. And
he produced the 3 first Wolf albums. So
awesome.
I love Wolf. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Peter have worked together on albums. Like I produced an album once that he mixed. So and then I got it back and I mastered it. So me and him have passed projects back and forth. He's awesome.
All right, and the other question is from Alejandro Erdmenger. He says, thank you for your time. One last question. Besides your great playing, do you have he says, you have a great tone. Do you remember what gear you used for your solo sound in low? Do you currently use any digital modelers?
I don't use digital modeling in terms of the actual guitar tone itself. Not currently. I've owned a Kemper in the past. I got rid of it. I'm right now using for my primary tone an amp made by it is a small format pedal board size amp, but it's actually an amp. It has tubes. It's high voltage. But it's the preamp stage of a Friedman amplifier. But the back end is an IR player, and with impulse response, which is digital. So the back end is digital. The front end is analog. The back end is digital, and I use that for going direct. Now, if I were to play live with this, I haven't played live with it because I got it since the last time I played live a couple years ago. I would run it analog out of it into a power amp and out to speakers. So it would be 100% analog at that point. But for home recording, since I want to stay married to my wife, I can't crank a loud amp up, in the house at all hours. So I use the analog front end of the Friedman IRX, which is, like I said, an all-tube, high-voltage tube preamp. It's the same preamp section out of their well-known and very, very popular amongst hard rock and metal guitar players, BE 100 amplifier head. But the backside gives you an IR loader, which lets you have an impulse response for the power amp, the speaker, and the microphone. So it captures like a digital impulse response of that. So you can apply that to the analog sound, and it's very, very good. And it sounds incredibly convincing. The only thing you would hear that would make you realize that it wasn't an actual amp is the fact that you not be vibrating the entire frickin' room like you would with a cabinet. But the recorded results sound incredibly good. Very analog.
Okay. And Deaf World Studios is asking the question. He says, how do you feel about newer blood coming who love the old school death and thrash stuff? I'm in that group, he says.
That's great. It's great. If new bands coming out that pay respect to old school thrash and old school death metal, I love it. I can't get enough of it.
I get the message. We gotta end the interview, right?
Oh no! I was just checking to make sure that.
Right, but I think
we weren't being invaded. I think it was a cat making noise with their food bowl.
It's the Murphy cat.
Yeah.
All right. So, Vic, I'm done with questions. Do you have anything? Anything else to close this interview?
No. Basically, I got all I wanted and more.
Fun fact. Our viewers are usually teasing me for the longest interview I ever did. It was with Kelly Shaefer. It was 5 hours. If you put our 2 interviews together, we are in 5 hours and 10 minutes. So we've broken the record. So,
right on.
Thank you, man. I mean, right. So I think it's safe to close this interview. Vic, do you agree?
I'm fine. And James, thank you very, very much. This was an honor and a pleasure for me. A real pleasure. So
same here, fellas.
Perfect.
Are we going to still be connected for a moment after you go off the air?
Yes, we will.
Yep.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up another epic session of the Elders of Metal Live YouTube podcast show. A massive thank you to the legendary James Murphy for joining us once again and sharing his stories, insights, and wisdom. It's been an absolute honor to have you back for part 2.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, man. Been my pleasure. And if anyone wants to keep up with me, what I got going on, what I'm doing, they can do that.
YouTube channel.
Certainly you can follow me on my Facebook page, but also you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, James Murphy Producer. That's how you find me, at James Murphy Producer, all in one. And I do have a YouTube channel, and very soon I'm going to start posting all my solos from Spiritual Healing and showing how to play them.
Amazing,
awesome.
amazing.
So go add me, subscribe.
So it was amazing diving even deeper into this incredible journey through metal history with you. And of course, a huge shout out to Vasilis Vic Kouroumalis, for leading another killer interview, bringing the questions, the passion, and the energy that make this conversation so unforgettable. And last but not least, a big thank you to everyone who tuned in, commented, and supported the show. Your love for metal is what keeps this scene alive and thriving. So if you've enjoyed this, let me say the typical message. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Elders of Metal for more killer interviews, live shows, and all things metal. Until next time, stay heavy, stay true, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.